Web browsing has become such a common activity in our daily lives. Whether you're doing it for work-related tasks or at home for entertainment, there's no denying its significance today. As technology becomes more advanced, this has meant that it also now inherently requires more resources, and so this obviously extends beyond web browsers. Usually that's not a problem because we have suitable software and hardware solutions available to us. But what's interesting is that sometimes users complain that their web browser uses too much RAM. A prominent example of this is Google Chrome, and that's something I also noticed myself since I use Google Chrome as my main browser. In this video, we're going to put the main web browsers to the test on PC. We're going to compare their RAM usage across popular websites, and then we'll look at what might cause high RAM usage and how to address it. Okay, so we'll be performing the test on 3 web browsers, Chrome, Edge and Firefox. The test will be done on a high-end Windows PC with 32GB of RAM. The reason for this is so that each browser can use all the RAM that it needs for the websites that we're about to test with no restrictions. Also, no browser extensions will be in use in any of the browsers. We will test 5 websites that fall under different categories. So we've got social media websites like YouTube and Reddit, informational websites like Wikipedia, AI/productivity websites like ChatGPT, and online shopping websites like eBay. This combination of websites essentially mirrors or reflects the activity of an average user, who would typically access websites similar to these. We will measure RAM usage for each website. Now, Chrome shows individual tab RAM usage when hovering your cursor over a tab, which is pretty convenient. Edge shows RAM usage in its Browser Task Manager, and Firefox shows RAM usage in its Process Manager. Alright, let's get started. So we kick things off by loading the same YouTube video on all 3 browsers. Edge ended up using the least RAM at 655MB. Firefox used a bit more RAM at around 800MB, and Chrome was the worst of the bunch, as it used significantly more RAM at approximately 1.2GB. We then moved on to loading the same Wikipedia page on all 3 browsers. Specifically, we are looking at the Wikipedia article for Google Chrome. Firefox was the most efficient in this instance, using only 80MB of RAM. Edge used a bit more RAM at around 110MB, and Chrome was the least efficient, using approximately 130MB of RAM. But things were very interesting with Reddit. We loaded a Reddit post with text and video content. Chrome and Edge performed nearly identically, with Chrome using about 800MB of RAM and Edge using just a little less RAM at around 780MB. Firefox, on the other hand, was a real surprise, using only 250MB of RAM. I knew I had to test it multiple times to ensure it wasn't just a single instance, and the results were consistent. When it comes to ChatGPT, we typed in 3 identical prompts, in which we asked the AI chatbot questions about Firefox. Specifically, tell me about Firefox, what platforms is it available on, and how long has it been around for? And then letting it answer each question to see how much RAM the browsers would end up using. Edge ended up being the most efficient, using only 125MB of RAM. Chrome came in second place this time, using 200MB of RAM, and Firefox came last, using a bit more RAM at around 230MB. Last but not least, eBay was also interesting. Taking a look at the eBay homepage, which features visual elements, Edge was the most efficient here, using only 140MB of RAM. Firefox performed similarly but not as good, using a bit more RAM at around 180MB. On the other hand, Chrome did the worst here, and by that I mean significantly worse than the other 2 browsers. Chrome ended up using around 450MB of RAM. Overall, Edge seems to be the best of the 3 when it comes to RAM management. It was the most efficient in YouTube, ChatGPT and eBay. Firefox did reasonably well too and came second overall, and was the most efficient in Wikipedia and Reddit. Chrome, on the other hand, was the least efficient of the 3, and this was consistent across nearly all websites, except with ChatGPT where it came second, but honestly that could have also gone differently. This is concerning because having a few tabs open together in Chrome can result in a big chunk of your RAM being used. So what if you also need to do something else while web browsing? Especially programs that may also require a big amount of RAM like games, video editing or 3D modeling software. What do you do then? So what causes too much RAM usage on Chrome in the first place? This is an interesting question given that Chrome is the most popular web browser around with 66% market share. That's huge. Now, all three browsers treat each tab as an individual process rather than one big process. So if you've got a YouTube video playing in one tab and then you're reading a Wikipedia article in another tab, these two will be treated as separate processes. This allows for better stability and security. So basically, if one tab crashes, it won't affect the rest of the browser. But it also means that this architecture will result in more RAM usage. But still, why does Chrome itself use more RAM? The reason could have to do with preloading and prediction features that Chrome has, which use the resources for web pages that you're more likely to visit next, and so this also contributes to higher RAM usage. If you use Chrome in particular, you may notice that sometimes loading a particular website that you tend to visit is almost instantaneous. I actually didn't know about this one until recently, even though I've definitely had this happen to me. So if you're having a hard time with RAM usage on Chrome in particular, what can you do about it? Is there a way you can reduce the amount of RAM it uses? Well, potentially yes. Of course, the easiest fix would be to just get more RAM in your system or get a computer with more RAM, but obviously that won't be possible for everyone. So if you can't get more RAM, then you should consider using a more efficient browser like Edge. Now, if you don't want to switch away from Chrome because you like it more, or maybe you've just become used to it, you could try a few things that might help, like disabling any extensions that are not essential or that you don't regularly use or need. For example, I know some people that tend to use YouTube extensions to do with analytics, and sometimes this can increase the amount of RAM that Chrome uses for YouTube, which is already quite high as we've seen in the test. You can also try clearing cache and cookies, which is especially useful for websites that you don't use often. Cache and cookies are both mechanisms used by web browsers to store data, but they serve different purposes. Cookies store information about your browsing activity, while cache stores temporary data to improve website loading speed. So clearing cache and cookies basically means removing website data and existing active sessions or logins. So after that, you can then begin to sign in back to websites that you do regularly use. Lastly, you can also make some changes to your Chrome settings, like disabling features like preloading and turning on memory saver mode, which should lead to less RAM being used. In the case of memory saver mode, it would reduce the amount of RAM used for inactive tabs, which is useful when you've got tabs open that you're not currently using but that you don't want to close just yet. But what do you think? Do you think Chrome is at the level that it should be as the leading web browser? Do you use or favor browsers like Edge or Firefox? And what about other browsers? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please like, share and subscribe. And feel free to let me know in the comments if there is anything tech that you're interested in and want me to make a video about. In the next video, I'll be taking a bit of a trip to the past, as I'll be exploring what using the iPhone 12 Pro Max is like in 2025. Make sure to tune in for that because it's going to be very interesting. Also, please consider supporting me by donating to my channel through buymeacoffee.com. I would really appreciate any support as I continue to bring fun and interesting content like this. Only if you can, of course. Link down below. This was the Wizard of Tech, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.